So, what if the popping sound your knee makes when you stand up in the morning has like absolutely nothing to do with your age and literally everything to do with what your brain was doing at 3 a.m. last night?
Yeah, that is such a wild concept to wrap your head around, right? Because we all just assume it's age.
Oh, totally. I mean, we have this incredibly universal habit of just swinging our legs out of bed, feeling that tightness in the lower back, hearing a joint crack, and we just, write it off.
Right, like it's just some sort of tax we pay for existing on the planet for another year.
Exactly. But today we're doing a deep dive into some source material that says that assumption might be completely backwards.
It really is a fundamentally flawed way to look at human physiology. I mean, the assumption is always that physical fluidity is this one-way street, right? That
Yeah.
it's just constantly degrading over time.
But the material we're looking at today challenges that narrative entirely. We're diving into the holistic blueprint for joint lubrication and lifelong mobility.
And the core premise of this blueprint is that mobility is not controlled by a single factor, like how old you are. It's actually this highly complex, interconnected biological system.
Right, and our mission for this deep dive is to completely map out that system for you. We really want to figure out why simple movements, like bending down or walking up a flight of stairs, just stop feeling simple.
And, more importantly, how a systemic approach can actually unlock lifelong mobility.
Hmm.
Because when people feel stiff, they usually just jump to one single mechanical fix.
Stretching. I mean, that's what I do. You feel tight, you try to touch your toes.
Right. But the blueprint is adamant that stretching, while it's definitely a piece of the puzzle, is absolutely not a complete solution.
Yeah, it says you can stretch for an hour every single day and still feel hopelessly stiff. Which, honestly, okay, let's unpack this because that sounds counterintuitive.
It does, but the limitation of stretching becomes really obvious when we look at the actual anatomy of a joint. I mean, people tend to think of the body as this structural machine.
Like if I just keep the gears perfectly aligned and pull the cables tight, the machine will run perfectly.
Exactly. But think about a real machine. Even if your skeletal structure is perfectly aligned, if the moving parts lack proper lubrication, they are going to grind against each other.
Oh, so the friction is going to cause micro trauma no matter how elongated or stretched out your muscles are.
Yes. The internal support is the real driver here. I mean, some people stay incredibly active well into their 60s and 70s, and it's because of joint support and recovery, not just because they do yoga every day.
Okay, I understand the mechanical limit there, but let me push back on that a bit. If I am physically stretching my muscles every single day, I'm literally elongating the muscle fibers, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I am creating tension, pulling them loose, forcing adaptation. Why isn't that mechanical pulling action enough to just maintain my mobility?
Well, because you're focusing entirely on the muscle tissue. And muscles have a massive blood supply.
Yeah.
But you're ignoring the cartilage inside the joint.
Oh, right, and cartilage doesn't have that same blood flow.
It has virtually none. Cartilage isn't a vascular tissue. It does not have veins pumping oxygen and nutrients directly into it like a muscle does.
Okay, so how does it stay healthy then?
So the blueprint uses this great analogy. Think of your joint cartilage like a very dense kitchen sponge.
Okay, I'm picturing a kitchen sponge.
Yeah, if you take a bone-dry, brittle kitchen sponge and you just pull hard on both ends, which is essentially what you are doing if you stretch a poorly lubricated joint.
Oh, wow. The sponge doesn't stretch at all. It just tears in half.
Precisely. You're just causing structural damage. To make that sponge pliable, it needs fluid.
Ah, so you can't just stretch a dry sponge and expect it to get flexible.
Right. But because there is no blood supply to just automatically pump fluid into it, the joint relies entirely on a different mechanism to stay nourished.
And that brings us right to the actual fluid environment inside the joint capsule, which is fascinating. We're talking about synovial fluid.
Yes, the body's natural shock absorber.
And I think most of us listening generally know that our joints rely on synovial fluid to reduce friction between the bones. But here's where it gets really interesting for me.
Oh, the hydration aspect.
Yeah,
I know.
because my immediate instinct is, well, if my joints are dry, I just need to drink way more water, right?
Which is a super common misconception.
Right, because I was actually reading a sports science paper recently that noted oral hydration takes hours, sometimes literally days, to properly reach avascular tissues like cartilage.
Entirely accurate, yeah.
So simply chugging a gallon of tap water right now isn't going to magically lubricate my knees for a workout in 20 minutes.
Well, this raises an important question, right? Because the blueprint emphasizes that hydrating your internal joint structures is a vastly more complex biological process than just increasing the volume of water you swallow.
You can't just treat your digestive tract like a funnel leading directly to your kneecap.
Ah, exactly. Systemic hydration relies on specific molecular binding. It's not just about the water itself.
So it's about what the body actually does with the water once it's inside you.
Right, it's about how the body holds on to the water within that specific joint space. So synovial fluid is rich in something called hyaluronic acid.
Which I've actually heard of from like skincare commercials.
Yeah, it's used there too for the same reason. It is this massive water-loving molecule that binds to water, creating that thick, slippery consistency. It really is the body's natural oil.
Got it. So it traps the moisture where it needs to be.
Exactly. If your internal mechanics are struggling to produce those specific binding molecules, or, if your electrolyte balance is completely off, you can drink a literal river of water and it will just pass right through you.
So it won't stay in the joint capsule at all, it just gets flushed out.
Yep. The sponge stays dry.
Okay, so if we can't force the hydration just by mechanically downing water bottles all day, what is the actual biological trigger for that fluid exchange?
Like, when does the sponge actually get to soak up the water?
Yeah, when does the body push the hyaluronic acid in the water into the cartilage?
Well, it requires a massive drop in gravitational load.
Meaning you have to take the weight off the joint.
Exactly. The body needs the pressure off the joints entirely to allow that dense cartilage sponge to finally decompress and pull fluid in.
Which means the primary window for joint replenishment happens when you lie flat. It happens during sleep.
Specifically, deep sleep.
And this connects directly back to that 3 a.m. brain activity we mentioned at the very start of the show. Sleep isn't just about, resting your eyes so you feel awake the next day.
No, it is a highly active physiological repair cycle.
The blueprint points out that deep non-REM sleep is this dedicated biological window, right?
Yeah, when you hit those deep sleep cycles, your pituitary gland releases pulses of human growth hormone.
Which sounds intense.
It's vital, though. This hormone acts as a chemical signal, telling your body's cells, specifically the chondrocytes in your cartilage, to start synthesizing new proteins.
So it's literally rebuilding the tissue matrix that got ground down and damaged during the day.
Exactly. And at the same time, your body's lymphatic system becomes highly active.
Flushing out all the bad stuff.
Right. It flushes out inflammatory markers, which are called cytokines, that pool in your tissues from all the friction of your daily movements.
Okay, so what happens if that deep sleep cycle is disrupted? Because I think we've all had that experience after a terrible night of tossing and turning.
Oh, or taking a cramped, upright red-eye flight.
Yes. You wake up and your entire body feels like it is literally made of rusted metal. Every single movement just aches. Is that why?
That feeling of rusted metal is a literal biological failure of the fluid exchange process.
Wait, really? It's not just me being groggy?
Not at all. When sleep is disrupted, you don't get that necessary growth hormone pulse.
Yeah.
And those inflammatory markers, the cytokines, they just sit there.
So the sponge stays totally dry and filled with metabolic waste?
Yes. That severe morning stiffness you feel is your body dealing with a joint capsule that hasn't been chemically flushed or relubricated.
Wow. Which completely explains why the blueprint leans so heavily into sleep hygiene as an actual mobility tool.
It's crucial. They recommend consistent sleep schedules to lock in those circadian hormonal pulses.
And limiting screen exposure before bed. Right?
Yeah, because blue light actively suppresses the melatonin you need to trigger that deep, slow-wave sleep.
They also suggest doing some light evening stretching, not for athletic flexibility, but simply to release acute muscle tension so you can actually fall into that restorative state.
Exactly. But we have to remember that the replenishment that happens overnight is only half the equation here.
Right, because eventually the sun comes up and we stand vertically and gravity hits the system all over again.
Yes. The fluid has been absorbed into the sponge, but now we have to actually utilize it. And here, the text draws a massive flashing distinction between daily movement and working out.
This is a total paradigm shift for a lot of people because we assume that mobility requires sweating profusely in a gym for an hour a day.
Yeah. But the blueprint argues that mobility is actually built through consistent, low-intensity daily movement, not massive, isolated physical trauma.
Let's go back to that sponge analogy for a second.
Okay, yeah. So to keep a sponge from getting brittle, You can't just soak it in water once in the morning.
Right, it'll just dry out by noon.
Exactly. You have to continually squeeze it and release it to keep the fluid moving through the porous material.
And long periods of sitting completely halt that pumping mechanism.
Completely. When you sit at a desk, you are applying static compression to your joints. You're basically squeezing all the fluid out and never letting it back in.
Okay, I really want to look at the classic weekend warrior dilemma here.
Oh, this is a great example.
Let's say I'm doing that static compression. I am sitting rigidly at a computer monitor for 9 straight hours a day, 5 days a week.
A very common scenario.
Right. But then on Saturday, I go to the gym and I do a hardcore heavy lifting session for 1 hour. I'm sweating, I'm working hard. Does that intense hour of squats and deadlifts actually undo the physiological damage of sitting like a gargoyle all week long?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, biologically, it might actually make it worse.
Wait, really? How could going to the gym make it worse?
Because when you remain sedentary for extended periods, your body actually adapts to that lack of movement.
It adapts to sitting.
Yeah. Fibroblasts in your fascia, which is your connective tissue, they start laying down new collagen fibers right along the lines of that static stress.
Okay, so what does that mean exactly?
It's a process called collagen cross-linking. Essentially, your body thinks sitting is your new permanent shape, so it starts weaving a microscopic cast to hold you in that bent position.
Oh man, it's literally cementing you into the shape of your office chair.
Yes. So if you take joints that have been immobilized, subjected to collagen cross-linking, and completely drained of synovial fluid,
And then you suddenly load them with heavy barbells for an hour.
right, you aren't lubricating the system at that point. You are just creating massive friction and micro-tearing in dry, brittle tissues.
So you really cannot outtrain 9 hours of continuous static stiffness with 1 hour of extreme force.
You can't. The machine oil isn't flowing, so the gears just grind. That's why the text really prioritizes frequent, continuous habits over these massive occasional efforts.
Like taking regular walking breaks.
Exactly. Doing gentle stretches, just engaging the muscles lightly, maybe every half hour, just to keep that osmotic pump working and the fluid circulating.
But I noticed the text includes a pretty vital caveat here.
Yeah, it notes that you can execute perfect movement all day long.
Right, you can get up every 20 minutes, take your walks, do your light stretching.
But even that falls short if the internal biological support is just missing.
And this is the ultimate frustration point for so many people. I hear this all the time.
Me too.
People say, I do the morning stretches, I drink the electrolytes, I curate my sleep environment, I stay off my phone at night, I take walking breaks at work.
They're doing everything right.
They're doing all the work, and yet their knees still pop. Their lower back still locks up. They still feel stiff. So what is breaking down in the system?
Well, that is exactly when the blueprint introduces the necessity of targeted internal supplementation.
Because the body's natural ability to produce that joint fluid can diminish, right?
Yes, whether from past wear and tear, genetic factors, or just environmental stressors. Eventually, you might need to supply the specific raw materials to kickstart it again.
Okay, so the source specifically introduces a doctor-formulated supplement called BIODYNAMIX Joint Genesis, which they say is rooted in Ivy League research.
Right.
But so what does this all mean? Because it is really hard not to be cynical here. I mean, a quote-unquote doctor-formulated joint supplement sounds exactly like the pitch of every late-night infomercial.
It definitely has that ring to it. I get that.
Isn't this just another magic pill Band-Aid? Like, how is taking this biologically any different from just popping an over-the-counter painkiller like ibuprofen when my knee hurts?
It is functionally the exact opposite of an over-the-counter painkiller.
Really? How so?
Well, a drug like ibuprofen works by chemically blocking the pain pathways in your brain. It temporarily reduces acute inflammation.
Okay, so it just masks the symptom.
Exactly. It turns off the check engine light, but it does absolutely nothing to fix the actual engine.
Oh, I see.
The blueprint explicitly positions biodynamics not as a painkiller, but as actual biological support. Its whole goal is to provide the joint with the specific compounds, like that hyaluronan we discussed earlier.
The stuff that holds the water.
Right. It provides the building blocks that the body uses to synthesize and maintain synovial fluid.
So it isn't masking the friction, it's providing the biological raw materials to actually manufacture the body's natural oil.
Exactly. It targets the root cause of the mechanical failure. But, I should point out, the text is incredibly careful to state that this is not a magic solution that supersedes the rest of your biology.
So you can't just take a pill and ignore everything else?
No, you cannot eat a highly inflammatory diet, sit motionless for 10 hours a day, sleep for 4 hours, swallow a supplement, and then expect to feel like an Olympic gymnast.
Yeah, the supplement is not an excuse to just ignore the whole system.
No, it is the fifth pillar of the system. The complete blueprint requires all five working together.
Okay, let's walk through those. Stretching gives the tissue pliability.
Right. Hydration provides the systemic water.
Sleep provides the hormonal environment for overnight repair.
Daily movement provides the mechanical pump to actually distribute the fluid.
And supplementation, like biodynamics, provides the specific, targeted molecular lubrication support that those other four habits rely on to actually function smoothly.
Exactly. It basically fills the biological gap that sheer willpower and tap water simply can't bridge on their own.
That makes a ton of sense. So we've mapped out the how of this system in some pretty great detail, but I really want to spend our remaining time on the why.
Oh, the psychological impact.
Yes, because the blueprint explores why restoring this mobility profoundly impacts our daily lives in ways that go far, far beyond just the physical sensation of, a tight hamstring.
That's true. There is a psychological component to this that is absolutely fascinating. It talks about the hidden cost of stiffness.
Yes. This was a massive aha moment for me, the realization that physical stiffness actually consumes an immense amount of hidden mental energy.
It's so true, though. I mean, think about what happens in your brain when your body is stiff.
You are constantly, subconsciously running these risk assessments on your environment all day long.
Right. Like, if I drop my keys, can I bend down to pick them up without a twinge in my back?
Or if I sit in this really deep couch at a friend's house, how much leverage am I going to need to awkwardly stand back up?
Or do I really want to carry all these heavy groceries up those stairs right now, or should I make 2 trips?
Exactly. It creates this constant low-grade state of physical hesitation. You literally stop moving freely through the world and you start plotting your movements defensively.
That is a perfect way to describe it. You're plotting defensively.
It is exactly like having a hidden computer program running in the background of your operating system.
Oh, I love that analogy.
Right. It's just constantly eating up your RAM and draining the battery, and you don't even realize how much cognitive load it was dragging out of you until you finally force quit the program.
Yeah, and when your joints are lubricated and movement becomes fluid again, you reclaim all that lost mental bandwidth.
You don't have to think about standing up, you just stand up.
Your posture improves automatically. You operate with confidence instead of hesitation.
The background battery drain analogy really highlights a massive flaw in how we generally treat physical health, I think.
We tend to be highly reactive, don't we?
Very. We wait until the pain is so severe or the stiffness is so limiting that it entirely dominates our thoughts, and then we try to fix it.
We wait until the sponge is completely shredded to pieces to try and add water to it.
Yeah, our mindset is, it hurts, let me fix it, instead of, let me support this system so it never degrades in the first place.
And that's why the blueprint frames mobility, not just as the mere absence of a physical ache, but as the foundational pillar of lifelong independence.
Preserving your freedom of movement for the future requires you to actually supply the system with what it needs today.
You don't wait for the car engine to seize up and smoke before you finally check the oil.
Exactly. It really is a profound shift in perspective. So let's bring all of this together and summarize the holistic blueprint we've uncovered today.
It was good.
True. Lifelong mobility requires this 5-pillar approach.
Right. Pillar 1 is daily stretching to mechanically engage the tissues.
Pillar 2 is proper hydration to maintain your systemic fluid balance.
Pillar 3 is quality sleep to trigger the hormonal cascades and lymphatic flushing of the body's repair cycle.
Pillar 4 is regular low-intensity movement to act as the mechanical pump for that joint fluid.
And Pillar 5 is joint support supplementation, like biodynamics, to specifically target and supply the internal molecular lubrication that the other 4 pillars utilize.
The ultimate takeaway here is that waking up feeling stiff, hearing your knees crack, and feeling restricted in your daily life is not just an inevitable symptom of getting older.
It's really not. It is a clear biological signal from your internal system that it needs more comprehensive support.
It is a check engine light.
Yeah.
And you actually have the tools to address it.
You do.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over today, building on that massive psychological insight regarding mental bandwidth.
Yeah, that ram drain.
Exactly. The blueprint showed us just how much hidden mental energy we waste every single day simply bracing against the friction of physical stiffness. It is an exhausting background process that constantly steals our focus.
It really is.
So it makes you wonder, if you finally adopted the systemic blueprint, if you lubricated the machine and reclaimed all of that lost mental energy and physical
And
confidence.
could you do?
Exactly. What else in your life could you suddenly achieve with a fully charged battery?
Because when you remove the friction from your body, you remove the limits from your daily potential.
So true. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep learning, keep questioning, and above all, keep moving.